Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. The sunlight poured gently into the kitchen, where Will was humming a little tune as he fried bacon. Ellie leaned against the doorframe and watched her husband's busy back, the corners of her mouth involuntarily rising. It was her favorite weekend morning, lazy and cozy. "Honey, guess what surprise I've got for our 10th anniversary?" Will turned around with an excited gleam in his eye. Ellie approached and gently wrapped her arm around her husband's waist, forcing a smile. "Wow, I can't wait to find out. It's going to be great, isn't it?" Will nodded smugly. "Of course. I've booked a luxury cruise and we're going to spend 2 romantic weeks in the Caribbean. Imagine ocean breezes, sandy beaches, cocktails." Ellie's smile faltered slightly as an unnameable loss welled up inside her. "Another cruise, another beach." Trying to hide her inner disappointment, she echoed, "Sounds fantastic, honey. I can't wait to spend this memorable vacation with you." Satisfied, Will kissed his wife's forehead and turned to continue preparing breakfast. By the way, he suddenly remembered something. "I invited Corey to the barbecue party this afternoon. You don't mind, do you?" Ellie froze for a moment, then replied, "Of course I don't mind. Corey is your best friend and an old friend of ours." Will smiled, "Great. We haven't seen him in a while, so it's a good time to get together." Ellie nodded, but a strange ripple went through her mind. Corey, the man with the humor, always brings something different to the humdrum. Afternoon sunlight flooded the spacious back garden of Will's house with laughter. The aroma of barbecue fills the air, and the slightly intoxicated atmosphere relaxes everyone. Ellie carried a plate of freshly grilled steaks as she gracefully maneuvered between the guests. Suddenly, a magnetic voice came from behind her, making Ellie's heart skip a beat. "Can I help you, beautiful lady?" Ellie turned and met a pair of deep brown eyes. Corey Parker, Will's best friend and business partner, was flashing her a charming smile. "Oh, Corey," Ellie tried to control her voice. "There you are." "No, I can do it myself." Corey, however, was unimpressed and took the plate with ease. "Don't be so polite. Let me do my part as host." As they walked side by side toward the table, Corey whispered, "You look beautiful today, Ellie. This dress suits you." Ellie felt her cheeks burn slightly, and her heart beat faster uncontrollably. She hinted to herself, "It's just a common compliment between friends, don't think much of it." Throughout the afternoon, however, Ellie found her eyes always unconsciously drawn to Corey. He spoke with wit and elegance, and that peculiar charm was irresistible. Every time their eyes met, Ellie felt an electric flutter. Later in the evening, Ellie was alone in the kitchen organizing dishes. Corey appeared quietly in the doorway and handed her a glass of red wine. "To our beautiful hostess," he raised his glass with a hint of ambiguity in his eyes. "Thank you for the wonderful time you've prepared for us." Ellie hesitated, but took the glass. As the two clinked glasses, Corey's fingers brushed the back of her hand, and the touch was like a spark that instantly ignited a long latent longing within Ellie. It was at this moment that Ellie realized that she was standing on the edge of a dangerous cliff. She remembered the morning's cruise plan that had left her frustrated and looked again at the man in front of her who could make her heart beat faster. Should she back up or leap down? Reason told her she should stay away from Corey, but a voice deep inside compelled her. Why not indulge once and taste the forbidden fruit? When Will's voice came from the garden, Ellie woke up as if from a dream. She hastily pulled away from Corey and forced herself to walk out of the kitchen. However, that foolish heart could no longer be calmed. Ellie stood at the edge of the horse pasture on a hot summer afternoon, watching a stallion run across the grass. She took a deep breath and tried to calm her inner turmoil. Ever since that barbecue party, Corey's figure had been constantly on her mind. "This isn't right," Ellie muttered. "I can't do this." Just then, a familiar voice came from behind. "I knew I'd find you here." Ellie turned to see Corey walking toward her, the sunlight outlining his perfect profile. Her heart raced again, but then a pang of guilt overwhelmed her. "Corey, what are you doing here?" Ellie struggled to keep her voice steady. Corey walked up to her, his eyes burning. I wanted to see you, Ellie. I've been thinking about you since the last party. Ellie felt a wave of vertigo, both anticipating and dreading to hear the next words. I know it's crazy, Corey continued, his voice low and magnetic, but I can't help how I feel. Ellie, I'm in love with you. The words hit Ellie like a hammer to the heart. She took a step back and shook her head. No, Corey, we can't do this. I'm Will's wife and you're his best friend. Corey stepped forward and gently grabbed her hand. But you're not happy, are you? I can see that. With me, you can truly live. Ellie felt herself disintegrating a little. She tried to break free, but her body wouldn't listen. Corey's words were like a magic spell, awakening a long-suppressed longing within her. Give us a chance, Corey pleaded. Just this once to indulge ourselves. The moment her sanity completely collapsed, Allie closed her eyes and let Corey kiss her on the lips. In that moment, all concerns and guilt dissipated and only searing passion burned. They embraced each other and Ellie gasped, both excitement and fear in her eyes. What are we going to do? Corey held her close. Don't think so much. We'll figure it out. Now, let us cherish the moment. And with that, Ellie embarked on a path of no return. She knew she was making a terrible mistake, but the emptiness inside and the desire for excitement drove her on. Each secret date with Corey was both exciting and guilt-ridden, but she couldn't stop anymore. Little does Ellie know, however, how this dangerous game will turn her life upside down. In the blink of an eye, Ellie and Corey's secret relationship has been going on for months, their meetings becoming more frequent while the lies get more and more concocted. That afternoon, Ellie stood in front of her closet, her fingers brushing against the new dress Will had bought for her upcoming cruise. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Corey. See you tonight at 7 o'clock at the usual place. Thinking of you. Ellie's heart raced with both anticipation and apprehension. She took a deep breath and walked downstairs to see Will watching TV. Honey, she said softly, I'm going out for coffee with some friends tonight and I might be late. Will smiled and nodded. Okay, have fun. Do you need me to pick you up? No, Ellie said hastily. I'll take a cab back. And so, lie after lie piled up like a carefully woven spiderweb, keeping Ellie and Corey's secret relationship firmly protected. At 7 p.m., in a secluded fancy restaurant, Ellie and Corey sat opposite each other. Candlelight reflected on Ellie's slightly guilty face. We can't go on like this, Ellie whispered. Will's starting to get suspicious. Corey took her hand. Don't worry. We'll be careful. Besides, soon you're going on vacation with Will, and we can take this time to cool off. Ellie nodded, but inside she was filled with dismay. She knew she was playing with fire, but there was no stopping it. Meanwhile, Will sat in his study at home, staring at his computer screen. He had wanted to surprise Ellie by finishing work early to accompany her out. However, an unexpected discovery made him frown. He overheard Ellie's credit card statement, which showed her recent purchases at restaurants and hotels he'd never heard of. These purchases coincided with the same nights that Ellie claimed to have gone out with her friends. This small discovery, like a seed, took root in Will's mind. He wondered how the discovery would change their lives. It was late at night, and Ellie came home gingerly. Will pretended to be asleep, but his insides were already making waves. He decides to keep a good eye on Ellie's behavior while he's on vacation, hoping it's all just his own paranoia. Ellie lay in bed, her heart still not calming. She is both excited about her date with Corey and feels deeply guilty about cheating on Will. She wasn't sure how much longer she could last in this state, but for the moment, she chose to revel in the stolen pleasure. On weekend mornings, sunlight pours through the curtains in the bedroom. Will woke up to find Ellie's pillow empty. He heard the sound of a shower coming from the bathroom and his thoughts drifted back to the credit card bill he found last night. Will sat up, struggling internally to confront Ellie directly. But in the end, he decided to observe for a while longer. After all, their 10th anniversary cruise is next week. Ellie came out of the bathroom and smiled when she saw that Will was awake. Good morning, dear. I wanted to surprise you with your favorite breakfast. Will forced himself to smile back. Thank you. That's very sweet of you. At breakfast, Will noticed that Ellie's cell phone had been vibrating. She peeked in a couple times and then quickly replied to the message. Work? Will asked, feigning casualness. Ellie was slightly flustered. Oh, nothing. It's just some arrangement at the club. Will nodded and didn't press the issue. But he noticed something unnatural about Ellie's expression. In the afternoon, Will suggested a walk in the park. Ellie readily agreed, and the two strolled hand in hand through the shade. We haven't done this in a while, Will said softly. You always seem to be busy these days. Ellie tightened her grip on Will's hand. I know. I'm sorry. Work and club stuff does take up a lot of time. Will stopped and turned to face Ellie. Ellie, you know you can tell me anything, right? If anything bothers you. Ellie avoided Will's eyes. I know, Will. It's just, I do seem a little tired lately. Maybe this trip is just what we need. Will looked at the side of Ellie's face, his doubts deepening. He wanted to believe Ellie, but his gut told him things weren't simple. On the way home, Will's cell phone rang. It was his good friend and business partner, Corey. Hey man, Corey's voice came from the other end of the line. I hear you guys are going on vacation? Will glanced at Ellie, who was driving, and replied, yeah, leaving next week. Awesome, Corey said. Say hi to Ellie for me. By the way, I've been having some problems at work lately, so we'll have to talk about it when we get back. After hanging up, Will noticed that Ellie's hands were shaking slightly. That night, Will lay in bed, listening to Ellie's even breathing, but couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the details of recent events, each one like a piece of a puzzle, gradually piecing together a truth he didn't want to face. Will closed his eyes, determined to find the truth on the cruise ship. Whatever the outcome, he's going to have to deal with it. The cruise ship slowly pulled away from the harbor, and Will and Ellie stood on the deck, watching the fading coastline. Ellie took Will's arm, a smile on her face. It's finally just the two of us, Will said softly. Let's enjoy ourselves for a few days and forget all our troubles, okay? Ellie nodded and leaned on Will's shoulder. Well, it's just the two of us. However, Will noticed that Ellie's eyes drifted a bit and seemed preoccupied. The next night, the cruise ship hosted a gala dinner. Ellie looked gorgeous in the new dress Will had prepared for her. Will should have been happy about that, but he couldn't ignore Ellie's frequent checking of her phone. Honey, Will finally asked, unable to resist, are you expecting any important news? Ellie panicked and shoved her phone back into her bag. Nothing, just checking it out of habit. Will decides to check Ellie's cell phone while she's in the bathroom. He knew it was wrong, but inner doubts drove him to do it. When he unlocked his phone, the code was their wedding anniversary. He saw a scene that broke his heart. The latest conversation on Ellie's texting screen came from Corey. The messages were full of ambiguity and intimacy, and there were even some private photos. Will's hands began to shake, and he felt a wave of vertigo. Just then, Ellie returned. She instantly paled when she saw the cell phone in Will's hand. Will, I can explain. Ellie shuddered. Will felt a surge of anger and betrayal like no other. Explain what? Explain that you and my best friend cheated on me behind my back? Ellie burst into tears. I'm sorry, Will. I don't know why this is happening. I love you. I really do. Enough. Will interrupted her sternly. Is this your love? Is our 10 years of marriage so worthless? Will turned and left the ballroom, leaving Ellie sobbing in her place. He felt his world crumbling and everything he once believed in becoming a lie. Will wandered aimlessly around the cruise ship and ended up at the bar. He poured whiskey after whiskey, trying to numb his pain. Will stumbled back to his room in the wee hours of the morning to find Ellie sitting on his bed waiting for him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Will, Ellie choked out, can we talk? Will looked at her coldly. What else is there to talk about? When we get back, you'll move out. I'll contact a lawyer about the divorce. Ellie broke down and cried, but Will was no longer moved. He turned toward the balcony and looked out over the dark sea, feeling his heart as cold as the bottomless waters. After the cruise, Will and Ellie returned home. The entire return trip was filled with breathless silence. As soon as he entered, Will headed straight for the study, leaving Ellie standing alone in the center of the living room, unsure of what to do. Will left the house early the next morning. He drove straight to a well-known law firm downtown. There was determination in his eyes as he pushed open the glass door. "Hello, I need to see Attorney Johnson," Will said to the receptionist, "about a divorce." While waiting, Will's cell phone kept vibrating. It was a text and missed call from Ellie. He didn't hesitate to put his cell phone on silent mode. Attorney Johnson, an experienced middle-aged woman, nodded as she listened carefully to Will's account. "Mr. Benton, I'm sorry to hear that, but rest assured, we are fully committed to protecting your rights. I suggest that we start collecting evidence immediately, including your wife's communication records, credit card bills, etc." Will clenched his fists, a coldness flashing in his eyes. "I want her to pay. Not just a divorce. I'm going to leave her financially destitute." Attorney Johnson frowned slightly. "Mr. Will, I understand your anger. But remember, the legal process requires calm and reason. We will do everything we can to get you the most favorable outcome." After leaving the law office, Will sat in his car for a long time. He stared at the screen of his cell phone, debating whether or not to call Corey. In the end, he decided to stay out of contact with Corey for a while and focus on dealing with Ellie first. By the time I got home, it was late afternoon. Ellie was sitting on the couch in the living room, looking haggard. "Will," she stood up eagerly, "can we talk? Please." Will looked at her coldly. "Not anymore. I've contacted a lawyer. You'd better find one too." Ellie's face instantly turned pale. "Will, please give me another chance. I know I made a big mistake, but I really love you." "Love?" Will laughed sarcastically. "If that's your love, then I'd rather not have it." "Ellie, we're done." With that, Will turned and went upstairs, leaving Ellie to cry silently in the living room. That night, Will lay on the bed in the guest room, thinking back over the last 10 years. All the once sweet memories are now bitter. He grabbed his cell phone and deleted all the pictures with Avery, then sent a text message to Attorney Johnson. "Please begin the legal process as soon as possible. I'm going to make this end quickly." After texting, Will sighed deeply. He knew that there was a tough battle ahead waiting for him. But in any case, he had made up his mind to end the betrayed marriage once and for all. One dreary afternoon, Corey stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his luxury apartment, a third glass of whiskey in his hand. His cell phone screen showed a dozen missed calls and unread texts, all from Ellie. Suddenly, the doorbell broke the silence. Corey hesitated, but eventually walked to the door. Outside the door stood a haggard-faced Ellie. "Corey," Ellie's voice quivered. "Will knows everything. I don't know what to do." Corey sighed and motioned for Ellie to come in. "I guess this day would come," he said. "I just didn't think it would come so soon." Ellie sat on the couch in tears. "I ruined my marriage and your friendship with Will. I'm a terrible person." Corey sat down beside her, wanting to comfort her, but not knowing where to begin. After a moment of silence, he said, "Ellie, we've all made mistakes. But the most important thing now is that we face it." Just then, Corey's cell phone rang. "It's Will." Corey and Allie exchanged a horrified look before Corey finally took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Will, I—" "Shut up, Corey." Will's voice was cold as ice. "I'm only going to say this once. As of today, you are no longer my friend or my business partner. I'll have an attorney contact you about the company." Corey tried to argue. "Will, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," Will interrupted. "You betrayed my trust." "Corey." The phone hung up, leaving Corey and Allie in a heavy silence. Corey suddenly realizes that not only has he lost his best friend, but he may also lose the career he's worked so hard to build over the years. The realization sent a wave of panic through him. "Ellie," Corey turned to her, apology in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but we can't see each other anymore. I need to do what I can to salvage my career." Ellie looked at him incredulously. You're abandoning me?" Corey closed his eyes in pain. "We all need to calm down. This relationship was a mistake from the beginning." Ellie stood up. The tears in her eyes had turned to anger. "So this is who you really are? When the going gets tough, you choose to run away?" "Ellie, I—" "Needless to say," Allie interrupted, "you men are all the same. Selfish and cowardly." With that said, Ellie grabbed the door and walked out, leaving Corey alone in the apartment. He walked back to the window and watched Ellie's figure disappear around the corner. Corey felt more alone and regretful than ever. He picked up his cell phone and hesitated for a long time before finally sending Will a text. "I know you don't want to hear me explain right now, but please believe that I am truly sorry for my behavior. If you're willing to give me a chance someday, I'll do my best to make up for the mistakes I've made." After the message was sent, Corey knew he might never receive a reply, but at least he tried. As night falls, Corey sits in the darkness, thinking back to a time when he, Will, and Ellie used to be happy. Now that is all in the past. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that from this day forward, his life would change significantly. It was finally the day of the trial, and Will walked up the steps with a steely look on his face, dressed in a sharp dark blue suit. His attorney, Johnson, followed close behind, heavy briefcase in hand. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy. Will and Ellie sat on either side of them, as if an invisible chasm separated them. Ellie was pale, her eyes were red and swollen, and she had obviously been through a long ordeal. The judge bangs his gavel and calls the court to order. Attorney Johnson spoke first. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Will Benton, seeks a divorce from Ms. Ellie Benton on the grounds of marital infidelity and betrayal of marital vows. We have ample evidence to prove it." She then presented a large amount of evidence: text message logs, private photos, hotel room records, and credit card charge details for Avery and Corey. Each piece of evidence was like a sharp blade that pierced Ellie's heart. When it was Ellie's attorney's turn to speak, he looked a little overwhelmed. "Your Honor, my client admits she made a mistake, but she is deeply remorseful and hopes to be forgiven by her husband and save the marriage." Ellie looked tearfully at Will, but Will's eyes were cold as ice and didn't waver. The judge asked gravely, "Mrs. Weir, do you admit to having an extramarital affair?" Ellie lowered her head, her voice barely audible. "Yes, I admit it." What followed was like a nightmare. Attorney Johnson steps in and reveals every detail of Avery's deception. Ellie's lawyer tries to defend her, but pales in the face of hard evidence. Finally, the judge pronounced the judgment. The divorce was granted, and Ellie lost most of her property division rights due to marital fault. Will gained ownership of the property, investments, and most of the community property. Ellie broke down and cried, "Will, please give me another chance. I know it's wrong, really." Will stood up and looked Ellie straight in the eye for the first time. "It's too late, Ellie." With that, he turned and left the courtroom. Ellie slumped in her chair, feeling her whole world fall apart. She not only lost her beloved husband, but also her comfortable life and social circle. All of it had come to naught because of her impulsiveness. She suddenly realized that she had lost not only her marriage and property, but also the most important person in her life and the best years of her life. As night fell, Ellie stood alone in front of what had once been her home. The house was dark, just like her heart at the moment. She knew that from now on, she would have to face the storms of life alone and pay for her choices. A year later, Will's face no longer had the old gloom, replaced by a sense of calm and determination. Will took a deep breath and felt the freedom that came with his new life. He has gone through a painful process of metamorphosis over the past year. For the first few months after his divorce, he practically buried himself in his work, trying to escape the emptiness inside. But as time passes, he gradually learns to face his emotions head-on. He started trying new things, signed up for cooking classes, started working out regularly, and even learned to play the guitar. These activities not only enriched his life, but more importantly, helped him to reacquaint himself. Will's career has also taken off. He reorganized the company, brought in new partners, and the company prospered. Despite the loss of Corey as his right-hand man, Will finds himself more capable of taking the helm on his own than he ever thought possible. Standing on the hillside, Will thought back to the past. He thought of Ellie, and there was no longer any resentment in his heart, only a faint hint of frustration. He'd heard that Ellie had left the city to start over in a faraway place. As for Corey, they never contacted each other again. Will pulled out his wedding ring from his pocket, the last of his old belongings that he hadn't gotten rid of yet. He looked at the ring, then gently buried it in the flowers. This action symbolizes that he has completely let go of the past and is ready to embrace a new chapter in his life. Just then, Will's cell phone rang. It was a newfound friend who invited him to a weekend hike. A smile spread across Will's lips, and he readily agreed. Will's pace became brisk as he walked down the hill. He knows that the future is still full of unknowns and that there may be setbacks and challenges. But at this moment, he has become stronger and more confident. Instead of placing his happiness in the hands of others, he learned independence and self-growth. Will believes that life will always surprise him if he keeps an open and positive mind. As the sun set, Will drove back to the city. On the way, he passed the old house he once shared with Ellie. The house has changed hands, with a brand new fence and bright windows showing off the new life. Will didn't linger, but continued to drive forward. The road ahead stretched into the distance, just like his life, full of endless possibilities. Back home, Will stood in front of the mirror straightening his clothes. The man in the mirror had clear eyes and a smile on his face. He knows that this 46-year-old version of himself knows more about himself and appreciates life more than ever before. Will turned off the light and gently closed the door. A new day was about to begin, and he, for one, was ready to embrace every moment that life brought. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.